All right, everyone. This is Ibarian and I've been away for a long time with regards to this YouTube channel, and I've been thinking about returning to it for a while, but I didn't want to go back to what I was doing before. I had gotten kind of burned out, and so I had this idea that I could bring on a photographer and have them talk about an image that inspired them, and then have them talk about an image of their own that could be loosely or directly related to that initial image that they talked to us about. And I convinced my friend Alan Clark to join me today and to talk about an image that inspired him and an image that he made that he wanted to share the story of. So, Alan, welcome, man, and thank you for being my test subject for this.
Well, thank you. I appreciate you asking, first of all. Yeah, this is what a great idea this is. And I think you're going to get so many different opinions and angles and things that we photographers are going to just absolutely love to listen to. And you guys, please share this with your friends because I think we don't talk enough, not just about what inspires us, but I don't think we talk enough about how we get there. Like we might talk about what inspires us, but we may not talk about how we apply that to our own personal jobs or our own personal, careers and stuff like that. I think when you go on social media, there's a lot of inspirational, motivational stuff. But how do I apply this? That's the most difficult part of it. And I'm just so appreciative
Yeah.
of this because that is what this is. That is exactly what it is. So I'm excited to be here today.
So, share with us the picture that served as your inspiration.
Absolutely. It is, I'm going to go, let's see where it is. And it, of course, isn't showing up on this just yet. So let me go to the actual page because it has to be re-recognize it again.
This is
I'm just
birthing
going to
pains,
pull.
people.
Yeah, I know. Technical. It's always technical. All right. So here's what we're going to do. I'm just going to double click it on the page we're on. One of my favorite photographs. If you can you see this? This is
Yeah, I can see it.
awesome. This is called the Santa Monica Kiss by Elliot Erwitt. I believe it's 1955, and this is pretty famous. It's a pretty famous photo. It just looks like a real moment to me. How did he get there in that real moment? I mean, was he seriously creeping up next to these people? And it's always been a mystery to me how he did this, and I've sought after information on this for a long time. But this image is so wonderful to me for a lot of reasons. And one of the reasons is because he actually did this during a commercial shoot. These two people weren't just normal people, they were actually models that had been hired for this job. I'm assuming it was an advertising job, and it was the two models in the car, and they were, acting. And they just kind of had a little real moment, or what seemed to be a real moment. And the viewer would never know the difference. In fact, most of us really don't know the difference because I had to dig. I had to dig for this information, and turns out this is not a real moment. It looks like it is because it was shot with 35. There's obviously no lighting. It has all the characteristics of a documentary style or candid style or photojournalistic type of style, just because of how you look at it's grainy. There's no lighting. I mean, it's just two people in a rearview mirror, and it's just one of my favorite photographs. And I think the reason why it's one of my favorite photographs is because my career has been commercial photographer, have been for years. And what you end up doing is spending most of your time, you know, uh, photographing for other people, and you don't really get a chance to work on your own stuff. And once I realized that once I got hired a lot as a commercial photographer, both here in Nashville and abroad, I knew that if I didn't try to put something of myself or try to work on my own work while I was shooting for other people, that I would never do it. And I realized early on And sometimes it's not even like super conscious of this idea. It was just that I just knew, as a photographer, most of us are just observers, and you would see an amazing moment. So take that amazing moment. And that's kind of what I would do sometimes. And then I realized, this is a thing. I need to do this every time I do this. And so it got to the place where I would actually plan. I used to call it planned chaos. And I would, because, when you're shooting advertising or you're shooting music and whatever, there's all these discussed storyboards and tears. We used to call them tears. Literally, just we'd tear ideas out of magazines and tape it to the studio wall or whatever. Now it's called Pinterest. So back then, we'd have to have all this stuff prepared, or we'd send sketches over for FPO or whatever you do. You'd sketch, and here's an idea, and all that type of stuff. And so you'd have all this laid out, but it was very planned. From 8 to 10 is this. 10 to 12 is this, break for lunch, crew leaves, crew comes back at 1 to 3 is this, you know what I mean? And so it was broken down into these days. And sometimes, there were 10-hour days, and you'd have, 4 or 5 setups with sub setups, and it's very planned out. And I did that for years. And I know a lot of us did, a lot of my mentors did, a lot of my people that I love did in commercial photography. That's how you do it. Doesn't matter, you're in New York in a big studio, Nashville, LA, whatever, around the world, Milan, fashion, magazine, editorial, whatever. There's just these plans, plans. And if you don't plan for yourself, and if you don't do this for yourself, you're just never going to get it. And so I started realizing that my time was just eaten up with work and jobs. And I just realized, what, for me to build my own personal portfolio, which I like to call the dream portfolio, I just needed to do this. And this is what Elliot did. Elliot worked for movie studios. Elliot worked for Life. Elliot did all types of, photography. And then I noticed a lot of his stuff. Here's what he was getting paid to do. You could tell. And then also here was a couple of things behind the scenes that he did. And you could tell he loved doing those things. It shows up, like his character and humor would show up in those moments way more than sometimes what he was actually getting paid to do. So
yeah, and it's interesting because when you look at his work, it's all Elliot, whether it is the commercial work that he did, that style. It's not compartmentalized. It's not like, okay, I'm doing this stuff for work, and it looks completely different from the stuff that I do for myself.
Yeah, the lines blurred. And I think he loved that, and I think the clients loved that about him. And from what I understood, he was a lot of fun on set. He was always, and I'm not trying to, because I only found out about Elliot, his working style and things like that after I started my own career. So I wasn't trying to emulate him. I just realized that maybe he and I were a little bit alike. And I really liked that. I loved that. And I think my clients and my friends like that maybe the line's a little bit blurred. It just doesn't seem like work. I just don't want it to, even if it's intense, I don't want it to seem like work. It needs to be fun. And I've tried to keep that up this whole time. So that's my favorite image.
Cool. So show us what you made and tell us the story behind it.
So the image that I made that I absolutely loved, that I did, it was on a shoot for a music artist named Chris Taylor. I was in San Antonio, Texas. And it's funny because, I was working for smaller labels when I first started. I just started getting into Hasselblad cameras a lot. And, it was fun. Those days were fun because, there were lower expectations. You're working for smaller labels. There's not as much pressure on you to photograph, let's say, a big artist, and you have to nail this shot for the campaign that's got to come out. It still gets a little advertising a little bit, even in the music world. But this was a smaller label, and they kind of let you do what you want, And I was down in San Antonio and Austin, Texas, photographing for this artist named Chris Taylor, and he was, very, very inspired by YouTube. Singer-songwriter, kind of ahead of his time, really. He was in a band when I first met him called Love Coma, and then he started doing his own stuff, which started really just becoming singer-songwriter or Americana. So I thought I would capture that. I thought I would capture some of America while we were down there. And I think it was there was a record called Worthless Pursuit of Things on the Earth. And that was the name of the record, which the title's like this long,
Wow.
long, Worthless Pursuit of Things on the Earth. And I loved that record. It was 100% me. And I don't know if you know the artist, the photographer Daniel Eldon. I'm sure you do. The photojournalist that was killed,
Yeah.
at a very young age.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Love that book. Love that book. I was very inspired by, I believe it was called The Journey is the Destination, I think. And he was a photojournalist, but also an artist, and made these scrapbooks and photographed for rooters in Africa and drove across. And he was, I believe he was a young Jewish kid, wonderful photographer, very cause oriented. He and his brothers and sisters and friends would get real inspired to help dig a well, and they'd go do this. They were very active and very helpful. And he became a photographer at some point. He was one of the, I believe, like 9 or something crazy photographers that were killed in the 90s during when Africa had at least 2 or 3, uprisings, and they were going crazy. There was riots, and they would just turn on the photographers. And this happened a few times during that period. And he was killed. I think he was around 22 or 23. And I was very inspired by this. Go look that book up. It's a great book for inspiration. But I was very inspired by that. And so I really, really, really wanted to do a book that was like that. I wanted to do a book that was about just found art. So in addition to, for this artist in Texas, I would go, and then anything that was like, if we bought a ticket to something, or if we had, a meal, or we, the wrapping paper that the camera, the film came in, we just, everything that was found art, we would photograph literally everything. The table at the diner we were at, we were all the little pieces of the journey, not just the journey that you're on, but also everything that helped you be on that journey. And so that was kind of the inspiration for that. And it came from that Dan Eldon book. Give me 1 second. I'm going to find this photo, but it was a photo that we were doing. It was downtown San Antonio. And,
while you're looking for it, I mean, I think that's a wonderful idea in terms of photographing the minutia. When I was teaching during COVID, I was teaching several classes through the Becce Creative, and because a lot of people were sort of stuck in their houses, I had them photographing their own lives and encouraged them to photograph those things around their house that they otherwise might never photograph. And it was really sort of fascinating on multiple levels, because it challenged them to see these objects creatively, rather than just looking at these things as, oh, this is something that's always in my kitchen or next to my nightstand or whatever it was. But also it helped to sort of flesh out their life at that particular moment, especially when we sat down to do the edit and we started selecting images. So those images, along with self-portraits or portraits of other people that were around the house, or candid photographs of their spouses or their children or their pets, that all of those things help to really flesh out the story. Yeah. And it was always really interesting to see the results after the 6 weeks. I always saw such a transformation in the photographers, because it kind of unleashed the way they saw when they gave themselves permission to make photographs of quote unquote nothing, right? Mm-hmm. That it wasn't about finding an interesting subject to photograph. It was rather, let me make an interesting subject about something that means something to me.
Yeah. I love that. Yeah.
And as a result, they make really genuine photographs that really resonate when you look at them, because it connects with people. It's familiar to people, even though it's not exactly their circumstances.
Yeah, that's right, because it's, a lot of times I think who we are as photographers is we're observers, and sometimes we're just asked to have a perspective on someone else, but we're really bad at it, having a
Mm-hmm.
perspective on ourselves, get to turn it on ourselves a little bit, and when you can do that, you start realizing, my life is more interesting than I think.
Yeah.
you know, it really is. And there's if you look around, there's evidence of me laying around everywhere in this room right now. And to me, that's, I don't, and some of my friends could tell if you put up a slide and said, whose table is this? They might be able to pick Alan Clark out. I laid these sunglasses over here if I laid that on this little pile right here to my right, that you'd probably be able to tell that it was me. And that's what those photographs mean. There's a little evidence of you everywhere you go, and I think sometimes we just think that it's just this right here, and it's not all that. It is that, but not all that.
Yeah.
Um, I'm trying to remember why we went to this location. I think I just loved the name of this bar, and I
I
had
haven't seen the
to.
picture yet. Could you
Now,
share the screen?
I'm going to build it up before we
Oh,
get there,
okay.
but
Okay.
the buildup was we were driving through trying to look for locations for this artist, and we needed the hero stuff. We had already kind of got the smaller stuff, the things we're talking about, the little pieces of me, pieces of him. We got a lot of that, and I was kind of looking for some of the hero images. Something about the self-deprecating name of this bar. It's just amazing, and I had to pull over. So we pulled over, and we go into the bar, and I say bar, but it felt more like a closed bar, and that the guy got the two beers that we got ordered from his own fridge. It was like a bar that was, it was like, what it was like. It was like going to the Dominican or some other place and stopping off at one of those little places that looks like a bar, but this might be someone's house, kind of
Yeah.
thing. And it had that feel to it. So he opened the door, we go in, and he literally had, I think he might have given us his two PBRs. And I don't know, man. There was just some story there, and the story wasn't necessarily the building, even though there was a great one with that. The story was the owner of the building, the guy that lived there, and he looked like he didn't have a lot of visitors, maybe, and a lot of customers and stuff like that. And I remember we were photographing Chris in the doorway, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, he just rolled up. He rolled up, and he got in
Oh,
the front.
wow.
And so here I am getting paid for this to be a magazine cover, album cover. And he rolls up, and it turns this commercial, supposed fake moment into an amazing real moment. And I absolutely love that.
This is an amazing photograph.
I absolutely love it. I mean, look at it. It's commercial on the left and reality on the right.
Mm-hmm.
And I barely got it. I had the Hasselblad in my hand. I was actually fiddling with the back to put on, the camera that put the black and white film onto it. And I looked up, and he just, like, I could see him roll up into the shot. And I could not get it up there fast enough, focus fast enough, and let it happen. In fact, the original photo, if you look at the original photo, it's off frame. It's like a Dutch angle. I barely got it.
Yeah.
Barely got it. Just because I got it up there fast enough, and when he noticed that he heard the click, thing, he looked up, and then it just changed everything. It became unreal almost instantly. He rolled out of the frame. He didn't realize he was in frame, but I absolutely love that. There was nothing fake about this moment, and so to me,
Mm.
my perspective on commercial photography, getting paid for something and or not, getting paid for it, it doesn't matter. And I told, as we discussed earlier, I said, Dan Winters, used to say, there's a Pulitzer Prize winning photograph in every direction. It's your job as a photographer to find it. And I remember when he said that, I kind of had that opinion of every direction. or every moment, and it's true. I think a lot of times we think that our art career and our commercial career are exclusive and they don't include each other. They're never going to be crossed. Those boundaries or lines are never going to be crossed. And like we were talking with Elliot, they were. To me, it's really about you need to be shooting even when you're getting paid to shoot. You need to be shooting for you every time you get paid to shoot. And that you need to put yourself into your photographs because truly that's what makes you different. That's why people hire you. They hire you for you. They're not hiring you for your followership. They're not hiring you for who you know. They're hiring you for your work and they're hiring you for those magical moments and the fact that you can grab them. And to me, that's what happened here. Most of the battle was I was aimed in the right direction. But that little gift, remember Sam Abel talks about that little gift from the universe or God, that's him rolling up into the photo. And if you hadn't been aimed in the right direction and you weren't prepared, your great photo wouldn't have gone through a good one. And that's kind of what
And
this
just,
is.
I mean, the composition is great. I mean, but it's the mirroring that happens between the two of them in terms of the.
Yeah.
It's not more of a sort of a counterpoint. It's not just young and old, right? It's so much about the body language, and I really like how both of them their heads are slightly downturned. You're not getting full eye contact, but there's this resonance that happens between the two of them, and just the fact that not only that he came into the frame, but that the musician's sort of body language and his pose or unpose all come off as so genuine. It doesn't feel contrived at all. That you really wouldn't know that this was a commercial shoot. You would immediately look at that and you just want to know the story, especially with the title of that name of that bar. You read so much into it. It's great.
I know, man. It's just crazy. And I remember telling him I might have said to him to look down. I might have told Chris to look down, but I didn't say anything else. I know that I opened the door. I might have even propped it with that rock. That rock is so much of this photograph, by the way. And I might have propped the rock. I know I framed it. I had already had it in my mind to frame it like that with Chris in it. And when he rolled up, it changed everything.
Yeah.
It's exactly what you're talking about. It's the fact that you're both looking down just blows me away.
But one of the things about being able to make this image is just seeing it in the first place. And I know for me, when I'm working on a shoot, sometimes I am so focused, so myopic on doing what I've been hired to do that I'm not really seeing. I'm looking at sort of the finish line in terms of doing what I'm supposed to do, but my head is so busy with that the moment when it reveals itself like that, I miss, or I just catch the tail end of it, and by that time it's too late to make the photograph. So what do you need to do for yourself to be able to take advantage of that? Especially when you got like you said before we started recording, you got 20 people around you looking at what you're doing. That wasn't the case here, but sometimes it is.
There was at least 3 people there that day besides me, so I think there was his manager and my assistant and maybe one other person. So there was 3 people all kind of aimed at him. But I think one of the things that I'm all in my head, I'm always thinking, and it's not an ego thing. People actually, and I can see it being that sometimes for people, they can do that because that can also get you there. Ego can also take you to these moments because if you're driving the ship, a lot of times, this is my car, and that's ego, but for me, it's not that. For me, it's, and Chris Buck will say this sometimes, he's not trying to make friends. He's there to get the photograph. And I'm trying to make friends and get the photograph, because of my approach. there's a lot that lasts after the photo's over with and done for me, because sometimes if you just meet amazing people, they can always be amazing people in your life. And so that's kind of what that is for me. But to me, I feel like a lot of times I am an illusionist or a magician over here trying to get you distracted with how easy and how nice this feels, and it doesn't feel intrusive as I'm taking a photograph like that. It's almost like a cat burglar. You come home, you don't realize anything's missing from your house. You know what I mean? It's like that. I'm so non-intrusive that I don't want my imprint to be so heavy, but I still got what I came for, if that makes any sense. So that to me, like when you're in that moment, you have to be ready, not for Carnegie Hall, but the thing that happened on the way to Carnegie Hall, if that makes any sense. You got to get both. You got to be there on stage. You got to sing. You got to do all the things you were trained for, prepared for. And then also there's probably a lot of cool stuff that happened on the way to Carnegie Hall, and you got to get both, so you got to get that and that, and that, if anything, just always prepared, always ready to pull that camera out, always ready to shoot. May not make you the most popular person in the world, but you will come away with something magical.
Yeah. Well, thanks for sharing that, and the images and the story. Where can people go to find out more about what you're doing, man?
Well, just AlanClarkPhotography.com is a huge part of it. I also, like you, very inspired by you, have a podcast called the Photo Untaken, and just like we do all the time, me and you always seem to get ourselves in these situations where we love talking, and I've always felt like you're my brother from another mother, and we end up having great conversations. I try to have a similar, if not the same, conversation over on the photountaken.com. So you can go over there. You can also find it through the website and wherever you get your podcasts. And I'd love, and I'm starting to get a little bit more emphasis on YouTube and things like that. I would like to open this up a little bit and put my presence a little bit more on there. So all of the Alan Clark photography stuff is just throw a rock and you'll find me.
All right. Thank you. And if you like what you're seeing here, put some comments in here, because I'm really I'm experimenting here to see whether or not this actually works, whether people have an interest in it, and whether it's going to be worth my time to, to get guests for this, record it, edit it. And I'm not going to rely on numbers, because I'm not going to get sucked up in that YouTube hell where I'm always looking at the stats. I'm doing this because this is something I like to do. But your comments are really going to spur whether or not I keep making these. So if you like it, yes, you can give it a thumbs up, but write something in the comments to let me know what you think and what your thoughts are. All right. So thanks, and see you guys next time.